Thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate it so much, seeing all these faces, and I know some of you have traveled quite a distance to be here, so thank you. Before I start, I want to thank the Art Gallery of Bancroft. When I found out that I'd be having a show here, I was so excited because, well, it's my first solo show, and also it felt to me a little bit like showing at this specific gallery. It felt like bringing the paintings back to where they were born in a way, because so much of my inspiration comes from this area, and I'm sure some of you can recognize that when you look around the room. I want to also thank Camp Panaka, and I have a little anecdote for you about a painting at the back of the room, but before I tell you that, I also need to thank my husband and sons. They have been unconditionally supportive of me in every way, and I couldn't do what I do without them, and they are so supportive and also overlook my when I don't quite have all the balls in the air when they should be. So I love you guys, and two of my sons are here tonight. The other one had to play rugby, so sports won over art. The story, there's a painting at the back of the room called Day is Done, and it relates to it's a happy coincidence for me that Camp Panaka is sponsoring this show, and because my sons work at Camp Panaka and also attend as a camper, this one. And one of the ways that I find inspiration and quiet space is I go out on the lake in my kayak and I watch the sunset. And it's sort of an evening ritual, and I never get tired of doing this, and so I'll go out and float around and poke around into various bays, but I like to watch the sunset. And there is a moment when, I'm sure you've all watched the sunset, but there's a moment when you're watching the sunset when that little fireball sinks below the horizon, and it inches down, and then plunk, it goes below the horizon. And on this particular evening, I was floating around watching this happen, and as soon as that sun sank below the horizon, a choir of little boy voices came out of nowhere, singing "Day is Done, Gone the Sun." I'm sure some of you know this song. I learned it in Girl Guides. So anyway, and so this was a perfect moment and beautiful, but not only in itself, this moment of a choir of angel voices coming out of nowhere, but it was beautiful to me, and this is where it ties in with my theme that I want to talk about. These were little boys, and they were at their campsite, and they had presumably a couple of teenagers in charge of them. And they were all assembled there watching the sunset. And these teenagers that were in charge of them orchestrated this whole thing. They sat there watching the sunset, and then they burst into song when the sun finally set, as you should, because who doesn't want to burst into song when you see a sunset? And the thing about this, they were teaching these boys the magic of nature and of special places that have deep meaning. And this is what one of the things that I'm getting at when I talk about emotional landscapes. So when I decided I wanted to call this show Emotional Landscapes, I had a few different meanings in mind, and funnily enough, I have a life drawing group, and that's not the funny part. I am in a life drawing group, and a few weeks ago we were meeting, and the lovely gentleman who was sitting beside me turned to me and almost like in an angry tone of voice, he's a lovely man, but he turned to me and said, "Your landscapes are not emotional, they're calm." And I kind of laughed because I thought it was funny, and I wasn't sure what to say, and then I said, "Well, they're my emotional landscapes." And this this meaning is one of the meanings that I'm talking about. We all have emotional landscapes that change depending on the day, depending on your mood, and we're not separate from the landscape outside of us. There's the interior landscape and the exterior landscape. And the landscape outside, and I think many of you probably relate to this because, well, we all have places that make us feel things. And these emotional landscapes might be real places that we have access to, or they may be memories, or they may be places we get to visit. And the last couple of years have made it more important than ever to be able to have access to these places. And we treasure them. And with everything going on in the world, and with the state of the natural world, it's more important than ever for us to protect these emotional landscapes that we feel connected to. The different ways the landscape makes us feel is when I go out on the lake and I go to these various places, I'm not trying to paint photographically, obviously. I'm painting different moods and different feelings. And I think that this is what people feel when, I hope, when they look at my work. A couple of weeks ago, I have a nephew who spends a lot of time up in Tamagi because his family has a tripping company up there. And he was in my kitchen, which is where I work, and he was looking. I was framing and I was hanging up some pieces to see how they interacted with each other, and he was looking at them, and he's 12, and he was like, "Did you paint those at my cottage, this island that he spends time on up in Tamagami?" And obviously I didn't, but what I loved about this was that he was feeling the connection. And there were, when I thought about this idea, there were two concepts that I wanted to just tell you about because it all links in with the emotion within the landscape. One is something that the media talks a lot about lately, which is forest bathing. And I don't know if you're familiar, essentially forest bathing is just going for a walk in the woods. But it's a Japanese idea, and a lot of people are adopting it. And what is interesting about this is studies have shown that it's not just healthy to go for a walk, it's actually, there's measurable benefits from going and being alone in the woods and out in the woods, walking and being there in nature. So this is again back to the protection and valuing what these emotional landscapes do for us. The other idea is maybe a little less familiar. There's a word that doesn't translate, but it's a German word, and it's Einsamkeit, Waldeinsamkeit. And if you literally translate it, it means like forest loneliness. But what the whole meaning of the word is is the mixture of loneliness, comfort, and rapture that you feel when you're alone in the woods. And essentially, these are the feelings that my emotional landscapes evoke in me, and when someone like my nephew connects with a piece and feels similar things, that's really the greatest thing that can happen, and all you can really hope for, I guess, when you're painting. And that's really all I wanted to say about these.
Time for one or two questions. If anybody has anything they want to ask of Tanya.
Do you ever actually sketch while you're kayaking, or is it what you're taking with you from your experience there back into your studio?
I haven't sketched in the kayak. I jot down notes sometimes in the kayak. I should try that. On land I have, yes, but I haven't done, because I'm usually, what happens with the sunset watching especially,
It's going to happen
is
right?
I look out the window, I go, oh my God, and I run down and grab my kayak and throw it in the lake and I go. So I know I want to do it, but sometimes you just don't realize all of a sudden it's sunset time. And my family is really good at saying, hey, it's about to happen, and then I go. And sometimes I miss it. But as you know, with sunsets, after the sun goes down, sometimes 5 minutes later, the whole sky explodes. So that's also a wonderful moment.
Any another question?
So, are you a night owl?
No.
No?
No, because...
Well, I don't see any sunrises, but you have...
There are sunrises,
There
and
are?
actually, I do, yeah, sunrises are my favorite time because no one is awake, and I have 3 sons, and they're quiet now, but they weren't quiet when they were young. And anyway, there's a lot of sleepers in my house, so when I get up and before the sun rises or as the sun rises, often I'll paint in the morning because it's a really quiet, beautiful time. But yeah, if you ask them, they'll tell you I go to bed short.
The sound of quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that painting originate from?
Well, it is a very, essentially looking up from where my cottage is. I mean,
Okay.
it's based on, as we talked about before, this is
Okay.
reality, and then the feelings that go with it and the emotions that go with it.
I love how you put your emotions into your paintings, as that means you put your heart in there too.
Well, I hope, I'm glad you can see that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay, Tanya, you're off the hook. Thank you very much.
Thank you.